America has officially hit the breaking point, and millions are snapping. And if you have not started preparing for what is coming, you are going to regret it. Not next year, not next quarter. This summer, because the data that was published in the last 2 weeks confirms what you already feel in your body every time you walk into a grocery store, open an envelope, or sit at your kitchen table doing math that does not work no matter how many times you run it. Something has broken, not cracked, not bent, broken. And the break is showing up in places that the news cameras do not point, because pointing the camera at a population that is snapping would mean admitting that the system they report from the inside of every night has pushed 330 million people past the limit that human beings were designed to absorb. 55% of Americans say their finances are getting worse, and that number is the highest since Gallup started asking the question in 2001, which means more people feel financially hopeless right now than during the pandemic or the Great Recession, and nobody on television is treating that number like the emergency it is. Gallup has been asking Americans the same question about their personal finances for over 2 decades. Are your finances getting better or getting worse? And in every crisis that the country has faced during that period, the number who said worse spiked and then recovered. During the Great Recession of 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed and the housing market imploded and unemployment hit 10%, the number who said their finances were worsening peaked at approximately 50% and then gradually recovered as the economy stabilized. During the pandemic in 2020 and 21, when the economy shut down and 22 million jobs disappeared in 2 months, the number spiked again and then recovered as the stimulus checks arrived and the job market reopened. And in 2026, the number has reached 55%. The highest in the 24-year history of the question, higher than the Great Recession, higher than the pandemic. And unlike those previous crises, the number is not spiking in response to a single acute event. It is climbing steadily, month over month, without a clear catalyst that would allow the political class to point to one thing and say that is why people feel this way, and here is how we fix it. The reason there is no single catalyst is because the pressure is not from one source. It is from everywhere, simultaneously. The Nation documented it 2 weeks ago with a precision that reads like an autopsy of the American household budget. A tomato costs 40% more than it did 1 year ago. Renting an apartment is 54% more expensive than it was in 2017. Housing prices are up 60% since 2019. Families will spend $120 more on electricity this year than they did in 2025. Credit card debt is up 63% since just 2021. Gas is at $4.50 a gallon because of the Iran war, and then there is shrinkflation, where the companies deceptively shrink product sizes while charging the same or even more, and stringflation, where every service that used to be included in a single subscription is now split into 3 tiers, with the cheapest tier delivering an experience so degraded that you are effectively paying more for less, on convenience fees that appear at checkout for the privilege of buying something online. And CBS News found that 67% of Americans are actively stressed about money, not occasionally worried. Actively stressed, daily. And 2/3 of Americans have not been able to attend social engagements, birthday dinners, weddings, holiday gatherings because of financial limitations. And 55% of those people lied to their friends and family about money being the reason. They said they were busy. They said they had another commitment. They said they were not feeling well. Because the shame of not being able to afford a birthday dinner in the richest country on earth is a weight that people carry silently. They do not post it. They do not talk about it. They lie about it. And the lying is the detail that tells you the breaking point is not approaching. It has been crossed. Because when a population starts lying to its own friends and family about why they cannot participate in basic human rituals like birthday dinners and weddings, the financial pressure has penetrated past the economic layer into the social and psychological layer. It is no longer about money. It is about identity. It is about the gap between who you believe you are and who your bank account says you are. And that gap is where people snap. Not at the grocery store, not at the gas pump, at the birthday dinner they could not attend and the lie they told to cover it. That is where the dignity breaks, and 55% are there right now, the highest ever measured. And nobody on television is treating it like the emergency it is, because treating it like an emergency would mean admitting that the economy they report on every night is not working for the majority of the people who live inside it. 84% of the American workforce says burnout is affecting their productivity, and 72% have been pressured to work through mental health struggles, and 2 in 5 senior managers received a new mental health diagnosis in the last 12 months, and the workplace is not where people go to earn a living anymore. It is where they go to fall apart. Modern health, one of the largest workplace mental health platforms in the country, published its 2026 Mental Health in the Workplace report in May. And the Chief People and Strategy Officer, Alison Borland, described what the data shows in a sentence that should be printed and taped to the wall of every HR department in every company in America. She said, "We are seeing an extraordinary collision of stressors across the U.S. workforce: AI, economic pressure, and global uncertainty, driving a level of strain that is no longer sustainable, and it is starting to show up in very visible ways. No longer sustainable. Starting to show up in very visible ways." That is the language of a professional who studies workplace mental health for a living, telling you that the thing that has been building invisibly for years has crossed the threshold into visible breakdown. And the numbers behind that sentence are the most alarming workforce mental health data ever published in a single report. 84% of workers at companies with at least 250 employees said that burnout is affecting their productivity to some degree. 84%. That is not a minority struggling in silence. That is the overwhelming majority of the American workforce, telling you that they are not functioning at the level the job requires, because the load they are carrying, financial, emotional, psychological, familial, has exceeded their capacity. And 72% said they have felt pressured to work through mental health struggles, up from 62% just 1 year earlier in 2025, a 10-point increase in a single year. The pressure to perform while falling apart internally is not just present, it is accelerating. And 50% of employees said they do not use employer-provided mental health days, out of fear of judgment. Half the workforce has access to mental health days and will not take them because the workplace culture punishes vulnerability. Because taking a mental health day signals to your manager and your colleagues that you are not coping. And not coping, in the American workplace of 2026, is a career risk. So you show up, you sit at your desk, you answer the emails, you attend the meetings, you perform the motions of productivity, while your nervous system is screaming and your sleep is broken, and your credit card balance is climbing, and your marriage is straining, and the rent is due, and the child needs something you cannot afford, and the AI system that was supposed to make your job easier is being positioned to make your job unnecessary. And 2/3 of employees said AI has raised productivity expectations. Among that group, 64% reported increased stress as a result, and 69% said they believe AI will lead to layoffs at their own company within 3 years, and 49% said they are afraid of losing their job to AI. Half the workforce is sitting at their desk, afraid that the technology on their screen is being trained to replace them while they use it. And then the number that should stop every executive in the country, 2 in 5 senior managers, 40%, received a new mental health diagnosis in the past 12 months. That is more than 3 times the rate of non-managers at 13%. The people who are supposed to lead the teams are breaking faster than the teams themselves. The managers are snapping. The people above you in the organizational chart, the ones who assign the work and set the deadlines and approve the budgets and deliver the performance reviews, are receiving diagnoses for anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other conditions at 3 times the rate of the people they manage. And the Rula 2026 Mental Health Report confirmed the loop. 34% of Americans experience high financial worry on a daily or weekly basis. 50% have cut back on therapy, gym, or personal health spending because of rising costs. And 54% feel exhausted from trying to stretch their finances. The stress increases the need for mental health support. The rising costs push mental health support further out of reach. The support that is not received allows the stress to compound. And the compounding stress produces the diagnosis that 40% of senior managers received this year. The workplace has become the place where every crisis in this video converges in a single human body sitting at a single desk trying to function while the world outside the window and the world inside their chest are both on fire, and the body is snapping. Not dramatically, quietly. The way a bone fractures under sustained pressure. You do not hear it, you feel it. And 84% of the workforce is feeling it right now. 1/3 of Americans skipped meals or drove less just to afford a doctor's visit, and the healthcare system that costs $4.50 trillion per year has become the single most common trigger for the moment a person's life goes from struggling to completely falling apart. The Nation reported that 1/3 of Americans reported skipping meals or driving less to save gas money specifically to cover healthcare costs. And that survey was conducted in mid-2025 before the Iran war spiked gas to $4.50, before low IH was eliminated for 6 million households. before the SNAP work requirements were expanded to 80 hours per month with no exemptions, and before the CBO projected that 5 million people would lose health insurance as a result of the current administration's healthcare changes taking effect in 2026. One-third were already choosing between eating and seeing a doctor, and the number has only grown since. And the healthcare system is not just a cost burden. It is the single most common trigger event that converts a struggling household into a collapsing one. The Commonwealth Fund documented that approximately 100 million Americans carry medical debt. 100 million, nearly 1 in 3, and medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States, responsible for approximately 66.5% of all filings according to the American Journal of Public Health. A single emergency room visit averages $4,700. A single ambulance ride averages $1,200. A 3-day hospital stay can generate a bill between $30,000 and $100,000, depending on the procedure and the location. And the insurance that is supposed to protect you from these costs has been engineered with deductibles of $3,000 to $8,000 that must be paid out of pocket before the coverage begins, copays that add $30 to $75 per visit, coinsurance percentages that leave you responsible for 20 to 40% of the remaining balance, and prior authorization requirements that delay treatment while the insurance company decides whether your doctor's recommendation is profitable enough to approve. On the Rule of 2026 Mental Health Report found that 50% of Americans have cut back on therapy, gym membership, or personal health spending because of rising costs. Half the population is cutting back on the things that are supposed to keep them healthy because they cannot afford to be healthy. And the people who cannot afford therapy are the people who need therapy most because the financial stress that prevents them from accessing care is the same financial stress that is creating the mental health crisis the care is supposed to address. And Brookings confirmed that the healthcare cuts are not theoretical, they are scheduled. The CBO projects that 5 million people will lose health insurance and 2 million will lose SNAP benefits as a result of expanded work requirements that demand 80 hours per month from non-elderly adults, including people with unstable hours, seasonal employment, or caregiving responsibilities that make 80 hours impossible. And the people who lose coverage will not stop getting sick, they will stop going to the doctor, and they will show up in the emergency room when the condition that could have been managed with a $40 office visit has become a $40,000 hospitalization. And the $40,000 will be added to the medical debt, and the medical debt will be added to the credit card at 23.79%. And the credit card will be added to the $18.19 trillion in total consumer debt that is already at an all-time high. And the person who entered the hospital with a treatable condition will leave the hospital with a financial condition that is terminal. And that transition from treatable to terminal, from struggling to collapsed, from managing to snapping, happens in a single billing cycle. One envelope, one explanation of benefits. One number that the person stares at in the kitchen at midnight while the household sleeps. And the number is the trigger. And the trigger pulls every other crisis into a single point of impact that the human nervous system was not designed to absorb. And the person snaps. Not because they are weak, because the system designed a mechanism that converts illness into financial destruction and calls it healthcare. Housing prices are up 60% since 2019, and rent is up 54% since 2017. And the American population is now divided into two groups. People who are trapped inside homes, they cannot afford to leave, and people who are trapped outside homes, they cannot afford to enter. There used to be a third group, there used to be a middle. People who could not afford to buy but could comfortably rent, people who rented while they saved for a down payment, people whose housing cost was manageable enough to leave room for everything else, the groceries, the insurance, the car payment, the credit card, the childcare, the occasional dinner out, the birthday party they could attend without lying about why they could not. That middle group is gone. The Nation documented that renting an apartment is 54% more expensive than it was in 2017. In 8 years, the cost of putting a roof over your head in a rental property increased by more than half, and housing prices are up 60% since 2019. In 6 years, a home that cost $300,000 in 2019 costs $480,000 today, and the median household income has not risen 60%. It has risen approximately 20% in the same period. The gap between what homes cost and what people earn has become a chasm that no amount of budgeting, side hustling, or avocado toast skipping will bridge. And the mortgage interest rate for a 30-year fixed loan is sitting near 7%, compared to the 3% that was available in 2021. A $400,000 mortgage at 3% costs approximately $1,686 per month. The same mortgage at 7% costs approximately $2,661 per month. That is $975 per month more for the same house, $11,700 per year. For the same walls, the same roof, the same square footage. The only thing that changed was the interest rate. And the people who locked in at 3% between 2020 and 21 are now trapped inside their homes because selling means buying at 7%, which means their monthly payment would increase by $1,000 or more for a comparable property. They cannot move. They cannot downsize efficiently. They cannot relocate for a better job. They are locked in by a rate that no longer exists in a market that has repriced everything around them. And the people who did not buy during that window, the younger Americans, the first-time buyers, the generation that was told to go to college and get a good job and the house would come, are locked out. The National Association of Realtors confirms that the median existing home price is near record highs, while first-time buyer share has declined to historically low levels. And the result is a population that is psychologically trapped. The homeowner who is trapped inside a house they cannot afford to leave feels the weight of a decision that was supposed to represent security and now represents a cage. The renter who is trapped outside a home they cannot afford to enter feels the weight of a future that was supposed to arrive and never did. And 771,000 Americans are homeless, the highest number ever recorded, because the bottom of the housing market has risen past the reach of the poorest segment of the population. And the psychological research on housing insecurity consistently documents that it produces anxiety, depression, relationship conflict, impaired cognitive function, and the kind of chronic stress that Mullainathan and Shafir documented reduces effective IQ by 13 to 14 points. The person who is worried about rent every month is not just financially burdened. They are cognitively impaired by the worry itself, and the impairment reduces their capacity to solve the problem that is causing the worry, which deepens the worry, which deepens the impairment. It is a trap with no exit, and the people inside the trap are the ones you see in the checkout line, with the flat expression and the tight jaw, and the phone calculator open and the look in their eyes that says, "I am one envelope away from the end of something." And 54% more expensive, and 60% more expensive, and 7% interest, and 771,000 homeless are not numbers, they are the dimensions of the trap, and the trap is where people snap, because a person can endure almost anything if they have a home that feels safe. And when the home is not safe because the cost of keeping it is consuming everything else, the last refuge becomes the source of the pressure. And a human being with no refuge is a human being with no floor. And a human being with no floor falls. And 771,000 have already hit the ground, and millions more are standing on the edge. 49% of American workers are afraid of losing their job to artificial intelligence, and 2/3 say AI has already raised the expectations on their desk, and the population is being asked to train its own replacement, while smiling about it. The Modern Health 2026 report documented something that should chill every working American who believes their job is secure because they are good at it. 2/3 of employees said AI has raised productivity expectations at their workplace. Among that group, 64% reported increased stress. 69% said they believe AI will lead to layoffs at their own company within 3 years. And 49% said they are afraid of losing their job to AI. Half the workforce. Afraid, not of a hypothetical technology, of the technology sitting on their desk right now. The one they are using to draft the email, summarize the meeting, generate the report, analyze the data, write the code, and create the presentation. The technology they were told would make their job easier, and it did make their job easier. And then the company noticed that easier meant fewer people could do the same amount of work, and fewer people meant fewer salaries, and fewer salaries meant higher margins, and higher margins meant a stock price increase that rewards the executives with options packages worth millions, while the workforce that trained the AI watches their positions get posted as automated workflows. And the cruelest dimension of the AI displacement is the mechanism by which it happens. Companies do not announce that AI is replacing you. They announce that AI is augmenting you, that it is your co-pilot, your assistant, your productivity partner, and then they measure your output against the AI-augmented output. And the new baseline becomes the AI-augmented number. And the person who was productive enough last year at 40 hours is now insufficient at 40 hours because the AI-augmented expectation is 60 hours of output in 40 hours of time. And when you cannot meet the augmented expectation, you are not laid off because of AI. You are laid off because of performance. The AI did not take your job. You failed to keep up with the AI. That is how the narrative works. And it is happening right now across every white-collar industry in the United States. Legal, accounting, finance, marketing, software engineering, journalism, design, customer service, human resources. The functions that were supposed to be safe because they required creativity, judgment, and human interaction are discovering that AI can approximate creativity, simulate judgment, and replicate interaction at a cost of pennies per hour instead of dollars per minute. And the 70% of the current political environment that Modern Health documented as making it harder to maintain positive mental health at work includes the AI dimension. Because the fear of displacement is not separate from the political anxiety or the financial stress, it is layered on top of it. The worker who is already carrying $252 trillion in collective credit card debt at 23.79% and watching rent climb 54% and skipping meals for healthcare and lying about why they could not attend the birthday dinner is simultaneously watching the technology on their desk learn how to do their job. And the combination of financial despair and existential professional terror is producing a psychological state that the Spring Health Report described as AI anxiety, and that state is most concentrated among senior managers, where 74% expect AI to cause layoffs and 57% fear losing their own job. The managers, the people who are supposed to steady the ship, are the most afraid, and afraid managers make worse decisions. They hoard information, they micromanage, they avoid risk, they suppress dissent, they create cultures of fear because they are swimming in fear themselves. And the workforce beneath them absorbs the fear and passes it downward and outward into their families, their relationships, their health, and their capacity to function as human beings outside the office. The AI is not just coming for jobs. It is coming for the psychological stability of the entire professional class. And the professional class is snapping, not loudly, quietly. The way 40% of senior managers get a new diagnosis in a single year, that quietly. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget just published a paper called Break Glass, because the United States has never experienced an economic shock as indebted as it is today. And the title tells you everything about what the people who study the numbers think is coming. In March 2026, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, one of the most respected nonpartisan fiscal policy organizations in Washington, published a paper with a title that should have stopped the country in its tracks. The title was Break Glass, a Plan for the Next Economic Shock. And the opening sentence was the United States has never experienced an economic shock as indebted as we are today. Never. In the entire history of the country. Not during the Civil War. Not during the Great Depression. Not during World War II. Not during the Great Recession. Not during the pandemic. The national debt is at $39 trillion. The annual deficit is approximately $2 trillion. Interest payments on the debt exceeded $1 trillion for the first time in 2025 and are climbing. The debt-to-GDP ratio has surpassed 120%, and the CRFB is not a doomsday blog. It is a Washington institution founded in 1981 that is led by former directors of the Congressional Budget Office and populated by former Treasury officials and White House economic advisors from both parties. And they titled their paper Break Glass. That is the phrase printed on the emergency box in the hallway of a building, the box you do not open unless the building is on fire. And the CRFB is telling the government to prepare the emergency plan now, because when the next shock arrives, the government will not have the fiscal capacity to respond the way it did in 2008 or 2020. During the 2008 financial crisis, the federal government spent approximately $1.8 trillion on stimulus, bailouts, and economic stabilization. During the pandemic, the government spent approximately $5 trillion. Those responses were funded by borrowing. And the borrowing worked because the debt-to-GDP ratio was low enough that the bond market absorbed the new issuance at low interest rates without triggering a fiscal crisis. The ratio was approximately 64% in 2008. It was approximately 100% in 2020. It is now 120%. And the CRFB's paper warns that the next economic shock, whether it is a recession, a financial crisis, a fiscal crisis caused by Treasury market turmoil, a further decline in the dollar, or a black swan event like a natural disaster or the collapse of a major industry, will arrive on top of a debt burden that makes the historical playbook unusable. You cannot borrow $5 trillion to stimulate the economy when you already owe $39 trillion and the interest alone costs $1 trillion per year. The math does not work. And the CRFB laid out what a constrained response would look like. Freezing Social Security indexing, freezing Medicare adjustments, freezing SNAP, freezing discretionary spending, raising taxes, implementing a deficit reduction surtax. Every element of the break glass plan involves cutting the safety net or raising the cost of living at the exact moment when the population is most financially vulnerable. The emergency response to the next crisis is austerity, not stimulus. Austerity, cuts, freezes, reductions. In the programs that 45% of the population that cannot make ends meet depends on to survive, and the timing is everything. Because the next shock is not hypothetical. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed for over 100 days. Oil prices are volatile and climbing. The SPR is at 1983 levels. The labor market is producing just 17,000 jobs per month, a level that Brookings said historically signals a crisis. Consumer sentiment is at a 46-year low. And the CRFB is publishing emergency preparedness papers because the people who study fiscal sustainability for a living can see what the GDP number is designed to hide. The economy is not growing. It is borrowing. And when the borrowing reaches the point where the next shock cannot be absorbed by more borrowing, the break glass plan activates. And the plan is austerity. And austerity applied to a population that is already at 55% saying their finances are worsening and 67% actively stressed about money and 84% burned out at work is not a recovery. It is a detonator. The CRFB knows it. The title of their paper says it, Break Glass, the building is on fire, and the emergency plan is to take away the fire extinguisher. The social safety net that was supposed to catch you when you fell has been cut so many times that what remains is not a net. It is a hole with a name tag on it, and your name is already on the list. LIHAP was eliminated for 6 million households. That sentence should have been repeated on every newscast in the country for a week. 6 million households that depended on federal assistance to keep their electricity on during the summer and their heat on during the winter were told the program no longer exists. And the elimination happened heading into the hottest summer on record, in a country where heat is the leading weather-related cause of death, in a year when electricity costs are projected to increase $120 per household on top of already record prices. And the SNAP work requirements were expanded to include all adults aged 18 to 64 who must complete 80 hours per month of work, volunteering, or job training. All exemptions were removed. Veterans, homeless individuals, former foster youth, the people who were considered too vulnerable for work requirements by both Republican and Democratic administrations for decades were told the exemption no longer applies, and the CBO projects that 2 million people will lose SNAP access as a direct result. 2 million people who are eating will stop eating, not because the food does not exist, because the bureaucratic requirement that was designed to reduce the rolls succeeded in reducing the rolls, and the people who fell off the rolls fell off the edge. And 5 million people are projected to lose health insurance. 5 million. In a country where 1/3 are already skipping meals to afford a doctor. In a country where 100 million carry medical debt. In a country where medical bankruptcy accounts for 66.5% of all filings. 5 million more people entering the system of no insurance, no preventive care, no prescription coverage, and the emergency room as the primary care provider at $4,700 per visit, billed to a credit card at 23.79%. And Medicaid work requirements taking effect in 2027 will end eligibility for most non-elderly adults unless they are working 80 hours per month, which Brookings noted jeopardizes coverage for anyone who loses their job, has unstable hours, or is retired but under 65. The safety net is not being reformed, it is being removed, program by program, exemption by exemption, enrollment by enrollment. And the removal is happening during the most acute economic pressure the American household has experienced since Gallup started tracking the question in 2001. The removal is happening while 55% say their finances are worsening, while 67% are actively stressed about money, while 45% cannot make ends meet, while credit card debt is at $1.252 trillion at 23.79%, while the savings rate is at 4%. The net is being cut beneath a population that is already falling. And the people who fall through will not land on another program. They will land on the street. The same street where 771,000 Americans are already sleeping. And the street has no exemption process, no appeals mechanism, no caseworker, no phone number to call. The street is the bottom. And the programs that were supposed to prevent people from reaching the bottom are being eliminated or restricted at the exact moment when more people are closer to the bottom than at any point in 24 years of measurement. And the people who designed the cuts will not experience them. The people who voted for the cuts will not experience them. The people who lobbied for the cuts will not experience them. The people who work 70 hours per week but whose hours do not qualify because the hours are split across 3 part-time jobs and none of them count as the 80 continuous hours the requirement demands, those people will lose their food and they will lose their health care, and they will lose their electricity, and they will not appear on a chart because the chart measures the people who remain enrolled, not the people who disappeared. The generation that was supposed to inherit this country has already checked out, and the data on Gen Z is not a warning. It is a eulogy for a future that will not arrive because the people who were supposed to build it have concluded that building is pointless. Only 21% of Americans believe the next generation will be better off. That number comes from the 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer. And in the United States, it dropped 9 points from the previous year alone. 9 points in a single year. And the number is not wrong. It is the most accurate assessment in the entire survey because it describes a mathematical reality that no amount of optimism can override. The generation entering the workforce in 2026 faces student debt of $1.77 trillion, a median home price that requires $110,000 in annual income, a rental market that has increased 54% in 8 years, credit card interest at 23.79%, healthcare costs that consume a larger share of income than at any point in modern history, a job market that is producing 17,000 positions per month, which Brookings called a crisis-level number, an AI revolution that 49% of the current workforce believes will eliminate their job within 3 years, and a climate crisis that is draining the aquifers, burning the forests, and producing the hottest summers in recorded history. And the 21-year-old in the video at the beginning of this series said it with the clarity that only comes from someone who has not yet learned to dress the truth in euphemism. She said there is no incentive anymore, and she is right. The incentive structure that produced the American middle class, work hard, get a degree, buy a home, raise a family, retire with security, has been dismantled piece by piece over 40 years. And what remains is a shell that still looks like the structure from the outside, but collapses when you try to stand on it. And the fertility rate confirms the checkout. The U.S. fertility rate has fallen below replacement level for every demographic group. Americans are not having children, not because they do not want them, because the cost of raising a child, $15,000 to $25,000 in childcare per year, $80,000 to $200,000 for a degree, $300,000 or more for a starter home that does not exist in most markets at a price a young family can afford, makes reproduction a financial sentence rather than a personal joy. And a society that stops reproducing is a society that has lost faith in its own future. The fertility rate is not a demographic statistic. It is a referendum, and the referendum says no. And the Edelman data found that 54% of low-income respondents believe they will be left behind by AI. Left behind, not challenged, not disrupted, left behind, abandoned, by the technology that was supposed to create the next wave of prosperity. And the people who believe they will be left behind are correct because AI does not create jobs for people who cannot afford the training to use it. It creates value for the companies that deploy it and eliminates the jobs that the people at the bottom occupied. And the generation that was supposed to inherit the country is looking at the inheritance and seeing the debt, the heat, the cost, the AI, the loneliness, the distrust, the $39 trillion owed, the $1 trillion in interest, the 264,000 dying of despair, and the 7% confidence in the government that is supposed to fix all of it. And they are not angry. That was the previous generation. This generation is past angry. This generation is indifferent, and indifference is worse than anger, because anger contains energy. Anger contains the possibility of action. Indifference is the absence of both. Indifference is the 88 million who did not vote. The fertility rate below replacement. The quiet quitting of work and life, and the future itself. And a country whose youngest generation has checked out of the premise that the system works is a country that has no one left to build the next version of itself. The builders are gone, not dead, checked out, scrolling, numb, waiting for something they cannot name and do not believe will arrive. The next economic shock will hit a population that has no savings, no buffer, no community, no trust, and no floor beneath them. And the government's own economists are publishing emergency preparedness papers because they know what is coming and they know the country cannot absorb it. Put every number in this video together and look at what they describe. Not individually, together, as a single portrait of the country that will receive the next economic shock whenever it arrives. The savings rate is 4%. That means for every $100 earned, $4 is saved. That is not a cushion. That is a rounding error. One unexpected expense, a car repair, a medical bill, a broken appliance erases a month of savings in a single afternoon. And $1.252 trillion in credit card debt at 23.79% means the population is not just without savings, it is in debt, negative net position, owing more than it holds, and $18.19 trillion in total consumer debt is the all-time high, the highest number ever recorded by Equifax, and 111 million Americans cannot pay their credit card balance in full. 111 million, 1 in 3, carrying a balance that grows at 23.79% per year, and 45% of households cannot make ends meet, cannot cover their expenses with their income. The gap is being filled by the credit card that is growing at 23.79%, and 55% say their finances are getting worse. The majority trending in the wrong direction, and consumer sentiment is at a 46-year low. The people inside the economy are the most pessimistic they have been since Jimmy Carter was president. And 67% are actively stressed about money. Daily, not occasionally, not during tax season, daily. And 84% are burned out at work. And 54% feel isolated. And 50% feel left out. And 90% say it is a mental health crisis. And 264,000 die of despair every year. And 771,000 are homeless. And trust in media is below 30. Trust in Congress is at 7. Trust in healthcare dropped 20 points. 70% will not trust anyone who thinks differently. And the next generation has checked out. And the safety net is being cut. And the CRFB is publishing break glass papers. That is the population that will receive the next shock. That is not a resilient population. That is not a population with capacity to absorb disruption. That is a population that is already operating at the absolute limit of what the human organism can sustain and is being asked to absorb more. And the next shock could arrive from any direction. An oil spike past $120 if the Iran war escalates. A stock market correction that erases the retirement savings of the 55 and older population. A bank failure that triggers a regional credit freeze. A cyber attack on the payment processing system that prevents transactions for 72 hours. A Category 5 hurricane that destroys infrastructure in a region that the federal government cannot afford to rebuild because the deficit is already $2 trillion and the interest is already $1 trillion and the CRFB's break glass plan is austerity, not spending. Any one of those shocks, which are not hypothetical but are the specific scenarios the CRFB listed in its paper, would land on a population that has no savings to draw from, no community to lean on, no institutions to trust, no government to appeal to, and no psychological capacity remaining to absorb the impact. And the impact will not be distributed equally. The top 20%, who control 57% of consumer spending and hold the majority of financial assets, will absorb the shock through portfolio losses and belt tightening. The bottom 80% will absorb the shock through hunger, eviction, medical debt, credit card default, and the kind of cascading personal collapse that produces the 264,000 deaths of despair that the country already records annually before the next shock even arrives. And the government that is supposed to respond has 7% confidence and a break glass plan that involves cutting Social Security and SNAP. And the media that is supposed to inform the population has below 30% trust. And the institutions that are supposed to stabilize the system have been hollowed out by the same forces that hollowed out the population. The country is a glass structure sitting on a fault line, and the fault line is active, and the glass has no reinforcement. And the CRFB knows it, and now you know it. This is what it looks like when a country snaps. Not a single moment. Not a dramatic event. 330 million individual breaking points happening simultaneously, in kitchens and parking lots and checkout lines across the country. And if you have not prepared, you will regret it, because nobody is coming to help you. I told you at the beginning of this video that if you have not started preparing for what is coming, you are going to regret it, and I meant it. Not as a slogan, not as a hook. As a warning from someone who has spent hundreds of hours reading the data that the institutions that are supposed to protect you are publishing in papers with titles like Break Glass and Americans are reaching a financial breaking point and no longer sustainable, and the papers are not addressed to you. They are addressed to policymakers and institutional investors and corporate risk officers, the people who can act on the information. You are not supposed to see them. You are supposed to see the GDP number and the stock market chart and the unemployment rate and believe the story they are designed to tell. But the story is a lie. And the lie is collapsing under the weight of 55%, saying their finances are getting worse, and 67% actively stressed and 84% burned out. and 54% isolated, and 90% saying it is a crisis, and 264,000 dying every year and 771,000 sleeping outside, and a government at 7% publishing emergency papers about the shock it knows is coming and cannot afford to absorb. Nobody is coming to help you. That is not cynicism. That is the operational reality of a government that runs a $2 trillion deficit, pays $1 trillion in interest, has 7% confidence, and is cutting the programs that 45% of the population depends on to survive. That government is not going to rescue you when the next shock arrives. It is going to rescue the banks, the way it did in 2008. It is going to rescue the corporations, the way it did in 2020. It is going to rescue the systems that are too big to fail, while the humans inside the systems are small enough to ignore. And the humans who will be ignored are the ones who did not prepare. The ones who did not store food when the prices were lower. The ones who did not pay down the credit card when they had the chance. The ones who did not learn a skill that produces something tangible. The ones who did not build a local network of people who can share resources when the system contracts. The ones who trusted the GDP number instead of their own grocery receipt. This is what it looks like when a country snaps. It does not look like a movie. It does not look like a single dramatic event that everyone witnesses simultaneously. It looks like 330 million individual breaking points happening in kitchens and parking lots and checkout lines and bedrooms at midnight. It looks like the person who puts 3 items back at the register, the person who sits in the car after loading the groceries because going home means facing the envelope, the person who lies about why they cannot attend the birthday dinner, the person who gets a new mental health diagnosis at 42 because the load exceeded the capacity of their nervous system. The person who checks their phone 96 times a day looking for something they cannot name because the dopamine system that was supposed to make life feel rewarding has been burned out by 4 industries that spent billions engineering artificial pleasure. The person who has not knocked on their neighbor's door in a year because they do not know what they would say. 330 million of those people, all snapping at different times, in different ways, in different kitchens, but all for the same reason. The math stopped working, and nobody fixed it, and nobody is going to fix it. And the people who could have fixed it bought farmland and bunkers and New Zealand citizenship because they read the same data you just heard in this video, and they had the money to act on it and you did not. But you have something they do not have. You have this warning, and the warning is simple. Prepare. Not tomorrow, not next month. Now. Store food, pay down debt, learn a skill, fill your tank, build a local network, because the breaking point is not coming. It is here, and the people who prepared will endure it. And the people who did not will wish they had, and wishing does not fill a pantry.